This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Dozens of Iraqis were killed and injured in the city of Salman Bek in Kirkuk in northern Iraq by a booby-trapped car explosion that targeted a government administration complex. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army stated that it has killed dozens of armed fighters during a military operation against Al-Qaeda, which has been underway for the past 3 days in the Diyala province.
عشرات القتلى والجرحى من جراء انفجار صهريج مفخخ في مدينة سلمان بيك بمحافظة كركوك شمالي العراق. هذا التفجير استهدف مجمع.
Dozens of people were killed and wounded by an explosion from a booby-trapped car oil tanker in the city of Salman Bek in the Kirkuk province in northern Iraq. This explosion targeted a complex that includes many government administrations in the province, including a police station. A medical source said that dozens of civilians were among those killed and wounded by the explosion. The number of deaths and injuries indicate the intensity of the explosion and the extent of damage that was sustained to nearby buildings. The Iraqi police said that a number of its officers are among the killed and wounded in addition to members of the local city council. This explosion was not the first of its kind in this province. The area has been witnessing escalating tension ever since the approval of the Iraqi constitution, which provides guarantees for Kirkuk. The Kurds have laid claims on the city, saying that it is part of the Kurdistan region in Iraq. Not far from Kirkuk, U.S. ground commanders in Iraq said that the U.S. Army has killed 41 armed assailants in a military operation against Al-Qaeda, which has been underway for the past 3 days in the Diyala province. Meanwhile, the Green Zone in central Baghdad, which is home to the U.S. Embassy and the Iraqi government, came under a number of missile attacks. Smoke was seen rising from the area, however, it is unknown whether there were any losses. These attacks were preceded by many other ones that have targeted the U.S. military base and the Iraqi government headquarters located in this highly fortified area.
On another note, a spokesman for the Iraqi Ministry of Oil said that the central government and the local authorities in Kurdistan resolved their differences over the draft of the Iraq oil legislation. In Baghdad, the spokesman added that the draft has been sent to the parliament and will be voted on in the next few days. However, the spokesman did not provide the final details of the agreement. Also in Iraq, Mahmoud Sheikh Radhi, the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs, said that his ministry ordered the Inspector General to investigate the credibility of the case raised by the U.S. forces relating to violations at an orphanage and the mistreatment of children who were living there under inhumane conditions. He added that the ministry will hold the appropriate official accountable for those violations.
الموضوع الذي خلقته القوات الأمريكية في هذه الدار.
The case, which was raised by the United States forces at this orphanage, needs to be objectively analyzed and undergo a logical evaluation, away from incitement and emotional reactions. I immediately ordered the Inspector General to carry out an immediate investigation into the case. We are waiting for him to complete the probe in order to take legal measures and administer justice to those who are at fault, no matter who they are. Once the investigation is completed, we will announce its results in its entirety.
نتائجه.
Reports say at least 18 people are dead and dozens wounded after a suicide bombing in a small Iraqi town. The attack happened about 90 kilometers south of the oil-rich city of Kirkuk in Iraq's north. Police said a truck loaded with explosives rammed into a government building in the town of Salman Bek. Women, children and local officials are believed to be among the dead. Most of the wounded were taken to hospitals in Kirkuk for treatment.
We're staying with Iraq. The U.S. military says 5 of its soldiers have been killed in a single attack in Baghdad. The Associated Press reports that the military said 8 more troops died on Wednesday, bringing the total to 13 over the past 2 days. Meanwhile, thousands of Iraqi Shiites have taken to the streets of Najaf to protest against last week's bombing of a revered shrine. The attack on the Al-Askari shrine, which is especially important to the Shia, raised sectarian tensions in the country. The demonstration's been peaceful so far, but security forces have closed off the city, they say, to protect the crowds.
And an agreement over Iraq's controversial draft oil law has reportedly been reached in Baghdad. Disputes over the law have apparently been resolved, and the draft goes before Parliament within a few days.
Differences between political factions have been holding up its progress. Iraq's Kurds, in particular, were against passing the oil law as it stands. Our Iraq correspondent Hoda Abdulhamid visited the Kurdish region to find out why.
Amir was a shepherd living on $150 per month. He used to earn extra cash by filling plastic bottles with a black, dense liquid.
It was flooding the land. We would just go and pick some for home. We were not aware that this black liquid was worth so much. I had a feel it was something when foreigners asked us to pick samples in small plastic bottles for $25 each.
It was oil. For decades, these rugged mountains have been surveyed by international organizations, and they all agree the potential for oil development is enormous here. Several oil companies are already in place, drilling and exploring. But no one can extract because of lack of legislation. A new oil bill has been at the center of tough negotiations between the Kurds and the central government in Baghdad. If passed, it will put 93% of Iraq's oil reserves under central control. Kurds will get 17% of oil revenues, equal to their percentage of Iraq's total population, and all oil-related income will go into one central account. But Kurds want their share of oil revenues to be put into a separate account and control over future explorations.
The Kurds want some sort of guarantee that the oil, for the first time in the history of the Kurds being part of Iraq, is going to be a blessing and not a curse. And they want to have some authority on how the oil is explored, how the contracts are being signed.
Amir now works at the Tak oil field, surveying the land. He earns 5 times more than before and purchased a fridge and a television for the family.
I want services, electricity and infrastructure. I want a modern village with a new house with air conditioning.
It will take a while before his dreams come true, because at the moment there is just one well functioning. The only one?
Only one.
In the entire of Kurdistan?
For the Kurdistan region.
Well number 1 produces about 2,500 barrels per day. Another 70,000 are provided by Baghdad, totaling about 30% of the region's daily demand. And while politicians are still haggling over the law, people here are obliged to rely on oil smuggled from elsewhere. If it's red, it's from Azerbaijan. If it's green, it's from Kuwait. And if it's yellow, it's from Iran. Like in the rest of Iraq, black market is a thriving business here, with the tacit consent of the government. Kurdistan is the safest area in Iraq. Its oil revenues could help reconstruct the rest of the country. But Kurds, with their newfound role as power brokers, are unlikely to compromise on the oil law, which Washington deems essential for national reconciliation, if no consensus is reached with Baghdad on the Kirkuk referendum. Hoda Abdulhamid, Al Jazeera, Erbil in the Kurdistan region of Iraq.
The Lebanese army and Fateh al-Islam traded fire today as the siege of Nahr al-Bared Palestinian refugee camp entered its 33rd day. Tanks and mortars pounded Fateh al-Islam positions, focusing their fire on the center and south of the camp.
Tanks and mortars resumed pounding suspected Fateh Islam positions in the Nahr al-Barid refugee camp, focusing their fire on the center and south, areas so far relatively unscathed since the clashes began more than a month ago on May 20th. Fighting was mostly concentrated around the cooperative, the Najil Ali, Sheikh Ali, Hawuz and UNRWA neighborhoods. The soldiers are advancing slowly, fearful of mines and booby traps that have already killed several of their number. Demining teams precede them as large bulldozers protected by sandbags and metal plates wait in the rear, ready to go into action. The surviving militants have now withdrawn into the southern part of Nahr al-Barid, which is in principle controlled by more moderate factions, such as the Fateh of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Fateh officials have said the order was given to prevent such a move, but clearly this has not been obeyed everywhere. Palestinian clerics acting as mediators on Wednesday met the army's intelligence chief, General George Houri, for talks on deploying a Palestinian force between the two sides in the old camp. Sources say there has been discord between Fateh Islam officials, Abu Huraira and Shaheen on the question of Palestinian mediation efforts. At least 141 people, including 74 soldiers, have been killed. The overall Fateh Islam toll is not known, but at least 50 militants are known to have been killed since the standoff began on May 20th. The army has since Wednesday been deployed in the new sector of Nahr al-Barid, a high-rise spillover from the boundaries of the original camp delineated by the United Nations in 1948.
Syria, meanwhile, closed its Jazeera border post with Lebanon because of the month-long battle between the Lebanese army and Islamists. The state news agency Sana said the closure, decided by the Interior Ministry, will stay in place until calm has returned to northern Lebanon. It alleged the move was designed to protect Syrian and Lebanese citizens. On May 20th, at the outbreak of the clashes in Lebanon, Damascus shut two other border posts at Arida and Dabusiyeh, also in central western Syria. Two other crossings remain open, notably the main Damascus-Beirut highway. Lebanon's anti-Syrian majority charges that the Fateh Islam militiamen, locked in a deadly showdown with the army at the refugee camp in northern Lebanon, have been linked to Syrian intelligence, an allegation denied by Damascus.
The Turkish National Security Council discussed a plan calling for a military action against the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. It also discussed another plan calling for the creation of a buffer zone along the Iraqi borders as an alternative to a full-fledged Turkish incursion in northern Iraq. Turkish officials are expected to discuss the idea of establishing a buffer zone in northern Iraq with Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki during his upcoming visit to Ankara.
In a session that was described by observers as important, the Turkish National Security Council discussed in detail the Iraqi file, including the Kurdistan issue in northern Iraq. The Iraqi Kurdistan region, where many of the PKK attacks against the Turkish forces were originated, has been a source of threat to Turkey's national security. Today, the Turkish National Security Council discussed ways to deal with the PKK.
The Council may recommend the creation of a buffer zone in northern Iraq. However, I don't think that the plan will be implemented in the near future. Ankara wants to mount pressure on Iraq in order to prevent PKK fighters from infiltrating into Turkey. The Council also asked the Parliament to issue a decision for a military intervention at the right time.
The Turkish National Security Council urged the Army Chief of Staff to postpone a proposed offensive against the PKK in northern Iraq until Turkish officials meet with Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki during his upcoming visit to Ankara. The Council urged Turkish officials to seek al-Maliki's approval for a United States, Turkish and Iraqi joint offensive against the PKK in northern Iraq.
The Council made several recommendations, including the creation of a 15 kilometers deep buffer zone in northern Iraq. However, it recommended against a military confrontation at this time. The Council urged Turkish officials to seek al-Maliki's approval for a U.S., Turkish and Iraqi joint offensive in northern Iraq.
For now, it seems that a consensus has been reached between those calling for a political solution and those calling for a military action. Iraq and the issue of the Kurdistan Workers' Party were the focus of discussion by the Turkish National Security Council. Despite their differences, all members of the council agreed that the PKK must be eradicated because it poses a major threat to Turkey's national security. This means that the Turkish army, which has been for months on standby, is waiting for the green light to invade northern Iraq.
Sporadic clashes erupted today between the Lebanese army and Fateh al-Islam in Nahar al-Bared refugee camp. The army took over positions that were previously under the control of the armed fighters. It seems that the battle between the Lebanese army and Fateh al-Islam has encouraged Palestinian refugees to disclose some of the harassments that they were subjected to by Fateh al-Islam members. More details from our correspondent, Rima Maktabi.
As relief agency employees were working hard to distribute aid among the refugees, and while the children were playing, Mahmoud was preoccupied with many thoughts. His brother Farid was shot and injured by Fateh al-Islam members 3 months ago. Farid then was accused of killing one of the organization's members and was detained by the Lebanese army for 2 months.
As soon as one member from Fateh al-Islam went to the alley, he was shot in his chest. Another member was also shot and killed.
Farid was injured while he was on his way from the Bedawi school to his refugee camp. He had just arrived to the hospital and underwent medical examination. He still suffers from his injury until today.
They were shooting at each other when I got shot, so they accused me of shooting one of them. I did not shoot any of them. To begin with, I did not have any weapon. The Lebanese government accused me of shooting one of the Fateh al-Islam members and detained me for 2 months.
Farid was shot by Fateh al-Islam and was detained by the Lebanese army. Now, he and his family are being displaced and their homes were destroyed by the fighting between the Lebanese army and Fateh al-Islam.
They went up to the roof and started shooting at the Lebanese army. We were running from one neighborhood to the other. A school teacher was telling them, "This is not right. We have children and civilians." One of them told the teacher, "Go inside your house, or else I will explode myself along with you."
I was at school.
What did you see?
I saw many masked individuals. They raided our school and went inside the classrooms. They did not let any student move from his desk. No one dared to move one step. We were very afraid and we started crying and screaming. Then they said that they would shoot anyone who would not stop screaming.
Why was the issue of Fateh al-Islam not dealt with from the beginning? We have been hearing this question since the battles between the Lebanese army and the Fateh al-Islam have erupted. Some believe that the responsibility falls on the Lebanese government. Some Palestinians blame themselves for allowing Fateh al-Islam to penetrate Nahr al-Bared refugee camp. Others, however, say they do not have the ability to fight such an organization. In either case, the Palestinians and the Lebanese have paid a heavy price. From the Palestinian refugee camp of al-Badawi, northern Lebanon, Rima Maktabi, Al-Arabiya.
Mr. Karim Nasser, was Hamas's victory in Gaza surprising? Were there any signs that something like this would happen? Was Hamas forced to take action to preempt Fateh?
إذا أخذنا الظروف السابقة منذ انتخاب بأغلبية ساحقة حماس في المجلس التشريعي.
Considering that Hamas had achieved an overwhelming victory in the parliamentary elections, one must have predicted that clashes would have erupted between Fatah and Hamas.
فكرتين مختلفتين كان عقائديا أو سياسيا طروحات مختلفة على الصعيد الأمني على صعيد كل شيء لذلك
The two groups have different religious and political ideologies. They also have different political agendas. There were two factors that made what happened in Gaza possible.
ياسر عرفات من سنتين وبعدين الانتخابات التشريعية، مما يدل على أنه كان في تحضير. وأنا بعتبر أنه هذا اللي صار.
The first factor is the death of Yasser Arafat 2 years ago. The second factor is the parliamentary elections. I think that we have a second Palestinian republic, the first republic being the one that was founded by Yasser Arafat in the West Bank. Of course I say republic, but this republic has no land. To say the least, this is a new era in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
بس على الأقل هذه مرحلة ثانية من الصراع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي.
Mr. Maher Uthman, media outlets say that the takeover of Gaza was not spontaneous. They say that it was planned and point to the incident of blowing up the headquarters of the Preventative Security Forces 2 days ago. They say that Hamas had spent months digging a tunnel to reach the headquarters. Other tunnels were also found, including some that were under a street that the Palestinian president uses. Palestinian TV showed these tunnels. This means that Hamas has been preparing for this takeover for months.
هذا صحيح. ظهرت بين الفينة والأخرى أنباء بهذا المعنى وكانت حماس تكذبها في حينه إلى أن
321. This is true. At the time, some news reports said that Hamas was digging tunnels to attack Fateh leaders, but Hamas denied these reports until the headquarters of the Preventative Security Forces was blown up using a tunnel in Khan Yunis 2 days ago. These were not the only preparatory measures that were taken by Hamas. It also brought weapons in huge quantities and allocated additional funds for Izz al-Din al-Qassam brigades. Hamas also formed the executive forces, which was unnecessary. In fact, before the National Unity Government was formed, the Hamas-led government placed these forces under the command of the Interior Ministry, which was also dominated by Hamas. The executive forces were financed by Palestinian Authority funds. Of course, this was considered illegal, and President Abbas demanded that these forces be dissolved. The Palestinian public considered these forces as an extension of Hamas's military wing. Hamas has a monthly military budget of $25 million, used only to pay military employees' salaries. Therefore, it was not surprising that Hamas has been able to achieve this quick victory.
فإنه ليس غريبا أن تكون قد حققت
In contrast, Fateh's military budget is less than $1 million.
Yes, much less. Thus, it is not surprising that Hamas has managed to take over the security bases very quickly.
The Palestinian Presidential Office distributed a video showing images of individuals who are wearing clothes with the words Hamas and the Qassam brigades written on them. It shows them entering a tunnel carrying explosive materials. This video was described as an assassination attempt on Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Gaza. However, Hamas denies this.
تمام الحيط هيك وتلقي فيه تسهيل بس هذا على هذه نمو على هذا نزل خلي بشوي على المهل طلاب حكم فيه ترخوش راحتكم ترخوش انتم ايوه بسم الله دل راحتكم دل براحتك اركزوا على الحين دخلكم يا الله يا الله يا الله لحظة شوي لله نبتغي رفع اللواء فليعد للدين مجده وليعد للأقصى عزه.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has received in Tehran the foreign ministers of 4 Caspian states, Russia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. At the meeting, Iran's nuclear program came to the fore again, as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said his country will back new sanctions against Iran only if the UN atomic watchdog says efforts to clear up questions about Tehran's direction have been exhausted. The United States and key European allies suspect that Iran's uranium enrichment program could be a cover for building atomic bombs, while Iran insists it is only intended for generating electricity. The international nuclear watchdog has said that a lack of fuller Iranian cooperation with its inquiries has made it unable to verify the nuclear program is entirely peaceful. IAEA Director General Mohammad al-Baradei has urged Iran to heed Security Council demands for a halt to uranium enrichment, but also has said only creative diplomacy, not sanctions, would ultimately defuse the standoff.
A number of Sudanese artists and poets launched a fundraising campaign aimed at saving the children of Darfur from the cycle of violence which has engulfed the region for years. More details in this report by Faiz Azaiki.
For the sake of the children of Darfur, the true victims of the continued crisis, a group of Sudanese artists launched a campaign entitled Save the Children of Darfur.
There is a role for art to raise humanitarian awareness in Sudan. Our role as youth, artists, painters, creators, and others is to raise our voice very high.
The campaign, which was greatly received, used music, dance, art, and poetry as tools to shed light on the humanitarian suffering and raise Sudanese awareness about the suffering of the residents in the region and provide assistance to them.
There is a role for art to raise humanitarian awareness in Sudan. Our role as youth, artists, painters, creators, and others is to raise our voice and appeal very high.
The members of the initiative attempted to reiterate their roles as artists. It is their duty to deal with national problems and remind others that art cannot remain a spectator of national wounds and the suffering of its citizens.
ولن يكون من الممكن أن يقف الإبداع الفن بكل أشكاله بمعزل.
It is not possible for art and creativity in all its forms to remain isolated from the political situation. Artists cannot take the role of spectators. It would be a catastrophe. It would be shameful to use art in ways that do not express ourselves.
عار على جبيننا أن نحتمي بغير إرادتنا.
At the conclusion of the first phase of the campaign, the Family Club Theater was transformed into a human painting containing all the different colors of Sudanese society. Children and housewives offered symbolic and material contributions. The poets presented poems that called for ending the violence. The artists called for a promised peace. However, all eyes were focused on the political figures who attended, hoping that actions taken at the political level would one day converge with public sentiment.
We are trying to save Darfur. All of us, as Sudanese, must take initiative, like this initiative, before anyone else in the world.
لسان حال منظمي حملة أنقذوا ولاد دارفور يقول
The people who organized the Save the Children of Darfur campaign say that the implications from the crisis of Darfur will leave a deep wound in Sudan and that all sectors of society must do what it can to heal this wound. If the political initiatives have not yet succeeded to end the crisis in the Darfur region, then those who organized the Save the Children of Darfur campaign hope that their popular initiative will bring about tangible results.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.